Most people are not making decisions. They are reacting. They react to fear. They react to pressure. They react to habit. They react to what everyone else is doing. Then they call it choice. But it is not choice. It is obedience wearing the mask of free will. Your life is not shaped only by talent, luck, or motivation. It is shaped by the level of thinking you use when reality becomes uncertain. When there is pressure, when the answer is unclear, when every option has a cost. That is where people separate. Not when life is easy, not when everyone supports them, not when the path is obvious. People separate when they must think without certainty. Machiavelli watched rulers rise and collapse because of this. Some had more power, more money, and more support. Yet they lost because they reacted emotionally. Others had fewer advantages, but saw deeper, waited longer, and understood what people really wanted. The world does not always reward the person who knows the most. It often rewards the person who thinks most clearly when everyone else is confused. In this video, you will discover 9 levels of thinking. The first 3 keep ordinary people trapped. The next 3 create strategic intelligence. The final 3 make a person difficult to control. Once you understand these levels, you will begin seeing them everywhere. In other people, in leaders, in relationships, and most importantly, in yourself. Number 1. Default thinking, the mind on autopilot. This is where most people begin. At this level, you are not choosing your life. You are repeating it, the same reactions, the same habits, the same excuses, the same emotional patterns, the same problems wearing different names. You wake up and call it a new day, but your mind is still using yesterday's script. That is default thinking. The brain prefers familiar patterns because familiarity saves energy. This is useful when performing simple routines, but it becomes dangerous when deciding your future. Your brain does not care whether a pattern helps you. It cares whether the pattern is known. That is why people remain in dead jobs, dead relationships, dead routines, dead identities. Not because they carefully chose them, because leaving would require a real decision, and real decisions create discomfort. A predictable person is easy to control. His fears are known, his reactions are known, his needs are known. If people already know how you respond to pressure, guilt, praise, or rejection, they know which button to press. You may say you want change, but your life responds to patterns, not speeches. Imagine 5 years passing. You look back and realize that nothing changed because nothing was truly chosen. You kept waiting for the right time. You called it patience. You called it caution. You called it being realistic. But often, it was fear with a schedule. The first level of higher thinking begins with one question. Am I choosing this, or am I simply used to it? Ask it about your work, your relationships, your routines, your beliefs, your reactions. A life you never question becomes a prison you helped build. Number 2, imitation thinking, the mind that copies the crowd. Once people wake up from autopilot, they often make the next mistake. They begin copying. They see someone successful and think, I will do exactly what they did. They copy the business, the routine, the language, the clothing, the strategy, the path. At first, this feels intelligent. It feels like learning, but imitation has a hidden weakness. It ignores context. A strategy does not succeed by itself. It succeeds inside a specific environment, at a specific time, with specific skills, resources, relationships, risks, and timing. When you copy the visible action, you do not copy the invisible conditions that made it work. That is why people chase trends and still fail. They see the result, but they do not understand the structure beneath it. Someone sees a successful entrepreneur wake up at 4 in the morning and assumes the hour created the success. Someone sees an investor buy property and copies the move without understanding capital, timing, debt, or risk. Someone sees a powerful person remain silent and copies the silence. But one silence comes from control, the other comes from fear. The behavior looks similar. The psychology is different. Machiavelli understood that strategy had to fit the terrain. A ruler could not simply copy another ruler because the people, enemies, timing, and risks were different. The same move could create opposite results. Copying can teach you, but it cannot replace thinking. A strategist studies what works. Then he asks, why did it work there? What conditions made it possible? What part applies to my situation? What must be adapted? The crowd copies the visible move. The elite mind studies the invisible logic. Number 3. Information thinking. The mind that hides inside research. At this level, a person looks serious. They read, they watch, they study, they collect data, they ask questions. This is better than imitation. But it contains another trap. Information can become a sophisticated form of avoidance. You are not deciding, you are collecting. You are not moving. You are preparing to prepare. You call it research because research sounds responsible. But deep down, you may be waiting for uncertainty to disappear. It will not. More information does not always create clarity. At a certain point, it creates noise. One expert says, move now. Another says, wait. One book says, focus. Another says, diversify. One person says, be patient. Another says, attack. Now you know more, but you decide less. This is analysis paralysis. The mind wants certainty before action because uncertainty feels dangerous. But real life rarely gives complete information. There is always something unknown. There is always risk. There is always a possibility you may be wrong. The goal is not to know everything. The goal is to know enough to make the next intelligent move. Information is input. Decision is command. A doctor may have test results and still need judgment. An investor may have data and still need timing. Some people do not lack information. They lack the ability to act without emotional permission. You may already know which habit must end, which conversation must happen, which relationship is draining you, which opportunity you keep delaying. You may not need another book. You may need a decision. Ask yourself, do I need more information, or am I using information to delay action? Research becomes weakness when it protects you from the decision you already know you need to make. Pause for a moment. Which of the first 3 levels traps you most often? Default thinking, imitation, or endless research? Remember the number, because escaping low-level thinking is only the beginning. The next 3 levels determine whether your decisions are strategic or merely emotional. Number 4, trade-off thinking. The mind that sees the price. Average people ask, what do I get? Strategic minds ask, what does this cost? That question changes everything. At this level, you stop looking for perfect choices. You stop demanding a path with no pain, no downside, no sacrifice, and no risk. You understand that every yes contains a no. You choose the job, you trade time, you choose status. You may trade peace. You choose comfort. You trade growth. You choose discipline. You trade ease. You choose one path. You close the door on others. Nothing is free. The price is often hidden. Machiavelli saw every political move through trade-offs. An alliance created protection, but also obligation. Mercy could create loyalty, but sometimes invited weakness. Cruelty could create fear, but also revenge. Delay avoided immediate pain, but could create future collapse. Every move had a cost. Every non-move had a cost, too. This is where ordinary thinking fails. People believe that not choosing is safe, but not choosing is also a choice. It trades control for drift. Imagine staying in a job because leaving feels risky. You avoid the risk of change, but you accept another risk, the risk of becoming bitter, stagnant, underpaid, mentally exhausted. You did not avoid risk. You chose a quieter one. Trade-off thinking removes fantasy. It forces you to ask, which cost am I willing to carry? There is always a cost. The cost of discipline or the cost of regret, the cost of honesty or the cost of resentment, the cost of growth or the cost of remaining small. Strategic thinkers do not ask for a painless life. They choose pain that builds something. You do not escape sacrifice. You decide whether the sacrifice builds you or buries you. Number 5. Probability thinking. The mind that stops demanding certainty. Weak thinking asks, will this work? Strategic thinking asks, what are the odds? That small change creates a different life. Will this work? Traps you inside yes or no. And because life rarely gives a guaranteed yes, many people freeze, they wait, they hesitate. They demand certainty from a world that does not offer it. Probability thinking is different. It does not need guarantees. It studies likelihood. A strategist does not say, this must succeed. He asks, given what I know, my resources, the timing, the risk, and the downside, is this a strong bet? That is how serious decisions are made, not with certainty, with judgment. Machiavelli wrote about fortune because he understood that part of life is unpredictable. You cannot control every outcome, but you can improve the quality of your decisions. Most people collapse emotionally when a good decision creates a bad result, but a good decision can still fail. A bad decision can still get lucky. One outcome does not always prove the quality of the thinking. Strategic thinkers judge the process. They ask, did I understand the risk? Was the downside survivable? Were the odds reasonable? What can improve next time? They do not demand perfect outcomes. They build better decision systems. Before making a move, ask 3 questions. What is the likely upside? What is the realistic downside? Can I survive being wrong? If the upside matters, the odds are reasonable, and the downside is survivable, you may already have enough to move. A strategic mind does not need certainty. It needs a strong enough bet and the discipline to accept uncertainty. Number 6, second-order thinking, the mind that asks, and then what? This is where serious thinking begins. At this level, you do not stop at the first consequence. You ask, and then what? Then you ask it again. Most people think one step ahead. That is why they make decisions that feel good today and punish them tomorrow. Second-order thinking follows the chain. You avoid the difficult conversation. First result, temporary peace. Then what? Resentment. Then what? Distance. Then what? The relationship collapses anyway. You spend money to escape stress. First result, relief. Then what? Financial pressure. Then what? More anxiety. Then what? Less freedom. You avoid discipline. First result, comfort. Then what? Weakness. Then what? Lower confidence. Then what? A smaller life. The first result often lies. The chain tells the truth. Leaders throughout history have destroyed their own position by chasing short-term approval. They delayed necessary decisions, avoided temporary pain, protected comfort, then paid a larger price later. They thought one step ahead, their enemies thought 3. Use this in ordinary life. Before sending the angry message, ask, and then what? Before quitting impulsively, ask, and then what? Before saying yes from guilt, ask, and then what? Before taking the easy option, ask, where does this lead if repeated for 1 year? That question can change the meaning of a decision. The difficult action may stop looking like punishment. It may begin looking like rescue. The future is built by people who can see past the first reward. Number 7, incentive thinking, the mind that sees what people really want. Most people listen to words. Elite minds study incentives. At this level, you stop asking only, what did they say? You begin asking, what do they gain? People often explain themselves using morality, loyalty, friendship, love, fairness, or concern. But beneath the explanation, there is usually an incentive. Status, control, security, money, attention, approval, access, avoidance of shame. This does not mean everyone is evil. It means everyone is motivated. And when you cannot see the motive, you remain confused by behavior that was predictable from the beginning. Machiavelli built much of his thinking around this. He understood that people often act from fear, pride, desire, and advantage. A person may support you while your weakness benefits them, then resent you when your growth removes their influence. Someone may call their behavior concern when they are really protecting access to the older version of you. Someone may encourage your comfort because your ambition threatens their position. Someone may praise your loyalty because your loyalty benefits them. Incentive thinking makes you less naive. It teaches you to ask, what behavior is being rewarded? What does this person gain if I stay the same? What do they lose if I change? What incentive is shaping this advice? Not all advice is wisdom. Sometimes advice is fear spoken by someone who does not want you to outgrow them. Watch patterns. Watch who benefits. Watch what changes when the incentives change. When you understand what people gain, their behavior stops confusing you. Number 8. Identity level thinking. The mind that decides who it is becoming. At this level, decisions stop being isolated. They become identity votes. You no longer ask only, what should I do? You ask, what kind of person does this action train me to become? That question is brutal. Because every action teaches identity. Every delay teaches you that you are someone who delays. Every excuse teaches you that you escape discomfort. Every boundary you abandon teaches you that your word is weak. Every private promise you keep teaches you that your standards are real. You do not only act from identity, you also build identity through repeated action. What you repeat becomes evidence, and evidence shapes self-belief. Imagine two people, now. Both say they want discipline. One waits to feel motivated. The other keeps a small promise every day. After 6 months, the difference is not only behavioral, it is psychological. One still hopes to become disciplined. The other has evidence. That is identity-level thinking. Machiavelli would not care much about your intentions. He would examine your pattern. A leader who promises strength but repeatedly acts weakly is weak. A person who speaks about discipline but lives impulsively is undisciplined. Pattern is reality. Some people are trying to build a new life while allowing the old identity to make every decision. It will not work. The old identity protects comfort. The new identity requires cost. The old identity wants approval. The new identity requires self-command. Do not wait to feel like a different person. Act in a way that produces evidence. Then let the identity catch up. Every private decision is a vote for the person you are becoming. Number 9. Strategic detachment. The mind that cannot be emotionally rushed. This is the highest level, not because it is emotionless, because it is not ruled by emotion. At this level, you can want something and still walk away. You can love someone and still see reality. You can feel fear and still move. You can feel anger and remain silent. You can feel pressure and continue thinking. That is strategic detachment. Most people allow emotions to grab the steering wheel. They make decisions from pain, pride, loneliness, fear, desire, the need to be understood. Then they call it choice. But honesty is not the same as obedience to emotion. When emotions rise, thinking often becomes narrower. The mind seeks immediate relief. It wants to reduce tension now, even when the decision damages the future. A strategist does not deny emotion. He delays obedience. Machiavelli understood that leaders controlled by emotion become predictable. A ruler controlled by anger can be provoked. A ruler controlled by fear can be pressured. A ruler controlled by pride can be flattered. A ruler controlled by approval can be manipulated. The same is true in ordinary life. If guilt controls you, people will use guilt. If praise controls you, people will use praise. If fear controls you, people will use fear. If loneliness controls you, people will use access. Manipulation requires an emotional handle. Strategic detachment removes the handle. It does not mean becoming cold. It means becoming difficult to rush. You can pause, observe, wait, let the emotion speak, then decide whether it deserves obedience. A detached mind can disappoint someone without collapsing. It can sit in uncertainty without reaching for immediate relief. It can walk away from something attractive when the cost is too high. It can make the right decision even when the right decision hurts. That is not emotional weakness. That is sovereignty. The person who cannot be emotionally rushed cannot be easily controlled. This was never about thinking harder. It was about thinking higher. Most people remain trapped because they do not recognize that thinking has levels. They repeat old patterns and call it personality. They copy others and call it learning. They collect information and call it preparation. They ignore trade-offs and call it waiting for the right time. They demand certainty and call it being careful. They chase the first reward and ignore the consequence chain. They believe words and ignore incentives. They speak about change but keep voting for the old identity. They obey emotion and call it authenticity. Then 5 years pass. The same problems remain. Elite thinking is different. It breaks autopilot. It learns without copying blindly. It gathers information without hiding inside it. It sees the cost. It thinks in probabilities. It follows consequences. It studies incentives. It builds identity through action, and it creates distance between emotion and decision. This is not motivation. Motivation fades. This is mental structure. The old mind asks life for certainty. The strategic mind builds clarity inside uncertainty. The old mind reacts. The old mind waits. The strategic mind observes. The strategic mind chooses. Now ask yourself, which level are you using most often, and which level must you develop next? Write the number in the comments, not as a performance, as a diagnosis, because the level of your thinking becomes the ceiling of your life.